Hey guys, John V from Phone Arena here. You're watching our video review of the new HTC One. Last year, HTC introduced to us the HTC One. It became the company's most popular and best-selling smartphone, but despite all the success, it still didn't keep HTC from being in the red by the end of the year. Already, we've heard about some enticing flagship devices that are on the horizon, like the Samsung Galaxy S5 and the Sony Xperia Z2, but don't count out HTC just because they have their flagship in the HTC One 2014 edition, or as some of you folks like to call it, the M8. If there's one thing that HTC is good at doing, it's making some really stunning looking phones, and the HTC One M8 is no exception. Frankly, HTC is one of the few companies that's very daring when it comes to handset designs, and shows here with the new HTC One M8. It really captures your eyes with its all-metal body. It's the same aluminum chassis from before, but HTC says that there's even more metal than ever before. It's now 90% metal in comparison to 70% with last year's model. We can tell you that it's sporting more metal than before, just because with last year's unit they had those plastic sidings, but this time the metal extends from edge to edge, so it has a more seamless look to it, cleaner at the same time, and just translates into one gorgeous looking smartphone. Not only does the brushed aluminum casing of the HTC One give it a premium finish, but it also gives it a very sturdy construction as well. Just as before, there's a subtle curve with the rear casing of the handset, giving it a very natural ergonomic feel in the hand. With the premium choice materials, it does contribute in giving it a heavier weight in the hand, but it just warrants a very sturdy build quality. Just like before, it features the signature dual front-firing speakers with HTC boom sound. Naturally, we're thankful to find that the HTC One now features a micro SD card slot to increase its storage capacity on the left edge of the phone, but accessing it is still a little bit of an inconvenience just because we got to use the pinhole size adapter to gain access to it. Towards the right edge of the phone, we have the volume controls. It's nice that it's raised and it has better feedback than before, and we have a nano SIM slot next to it. Likewise, we're also happy to see that the power button itself is a little bit more distinguishable to the touch, and its placement is now positioned to the top right corner, so it makes it more ideal to access for those right-handed users out there. You can see it has like this plastic trim to it, and underneath this is the built-in IR blaster. Lastly, in the bottom edge of the phone, we have the 3.5mm headset jack with a built-in amplifier, the micro USB port for charging data connectivity, and you can also gain video out functionality with the aid of an optional MHL adapter. Things get a little bit juicy in the rear of the phone, and as you can tell, it features two cameras, which consists its dual camera system. On one end, we have the primary camera in the rear, which is the same HTC Ultra Pixel camera from last year's model. So it measures up at 4 megapixels. It packs a backside illuminated sensor, an f2.0 aperture lens, dual LED flash, and has the ability to shoot 1080p video. Perched next to it is the secondary camera. Now, this is not the first time we've seen two cameras in the back of a handset, just because in the past they've been used to capture 3D content. But this time around with the HTC One M8, the secondary camera is just strictly used for depth information, and it provides for some interesting effects, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in the review. For those of you out there that are serious about taking some good-looking selfies, you'll be happy to know that the HTC One features a wide-angle, front-facing 5-megapixel camera. Basically, the only thing new about the display this time around is its larger size, so it's at a more flagship-like 5 inches, which is nice compared to the 4.7-inch display last year. It's still at 1080p resolution, and it's still Super LCD 3 technology. Technically speaking, its pixel density count has dropped compared to last year's model. That's because it still has the same 1080p resolution, but a larger 5-inch panel. Nevertheless, though, it's still super sharp and enables us to view even the tiniest of text with no issues at all. Some of the other likable qualities about the display are present here again, seeing that it's Super LCD 3 technology. It has great outdoor visibility. The viewing angles are okay. It doesn't have too much distortion at wide angles. On top of that, the color reproduction is nice and lively. It has a vibrant look to it, but it tends to have a little bit of a bluish tinge to it. Overall, we can't be too critical about the display, even though the only thing new here is the larger size of the panel. At the end of the day, it still gets the job done by being attractive and sharp. Accompanying the redesign of the phone is the updated Sense 6.0 user interface, and it sees some subtle enhancements to the presentation and functionality, but for the most part, it pays homage to what we've seen already with last year's model. It continues to be one of the more visually rich looking user interface out there. It doesn't try to overcomplicate things. They kept it simple. It has that sleek modern design, and when you go all the way to the left, you have its signature HTC Blink feed home screen, which aggregates all of the social networking content in one place. For the most part, the functionality of Blink Feed doesn't change a lot. It just remains to be a hub for our social networking content. We could have better organization by selecting the services they want to view. They've added Fitbit to the mix too, but unless you have some really socially engaged friends, you're not going to see a whole lot of the updates come up in Blink Feed. Despite that, it's better at sensing what we like based on our Facebook likes, and on top of that, it'll even make some recommendations with Foursquare. It's not really a big thing, but Sense 6.0 sees just a minor visual tweak with the experience, and we see that with the different theme colors with all the applications. So for things like the messaging-oriented applications, you'll see it highlighted in this blue color, and you see that in the text messaging application, the phone dialer. But however, if we go to some data-centric apps like the Play Store, it's going to have a green accent to it. And if we go to a multimedia-centric one, it's going to be red. The biggest undertaking with the experience is the new motion launch gestures that are in tow. So it basically applies to when the phone is off, and we're going to go through them. Some of them are more useful than others though. Rather than pressing the power button just to view the time or date, in order for us to do it very quickly, we just double tap on the screen. It automatically will display the information we want. Now, it's nice and convenient, but not quite as practical as the Moto X's active display feature. Holding the handset in portrait and we do a swipe up gesture will unlock the device and bring us back to the last thing we were doing. Swiping to the right will get us into the HTC Blink feed, while swiping to the left will jump us into the typical Android home screen with all the widgets. For quick access to voice dialing, all we gotta do is swipe down and automatically will launch the service for us. It's even faster at gaining access to the camera. All we gotta do is just put the handset in landscape, press either of the volume controls, and automatically will jump right into it. And lastly, there's also another gesture that allows us to pick up incoming phone calls. So when it's ringing, all we gotta do is just pick it up, place it next to it, and automatically will pick up. At the end of the day, Sense 6.0 doesn't necessarily bring forth any innovative qualities to it, but it's just nice to see that it's still a clean, modern-looking UI that prides highly when it comes to the visual presentation and doesn't try to inundate us with some redundant features. True to being a flagship smartphone, the HTC One is powered by the latest piece of silicon from Qualcomm's camp. It's a quad-core 2.3 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor coupled with 2 GB of RAM and the Adreno 330 GPU. And obviously, with that piece of hardware, it's able to handle even the most basic and even intensive tasks with little issues. And in general, it has a very snappy feel to it. The beefy processor lends itself in the web browser where it's able to handle even complex web pages with no issues at all. Now it features 4G LTE connectivity, but our particular unit is the one for the overseas market, so we're using with HSPA Plus connectivity. It's still able to load pages very quickly, and as you can tell, some of the kinetic scrolling, even navigational controls are pretty instantaneous and swift. The only advantage that we see here with the messaging experience is the slightly larger layout of the on-screen keyboards, thanks in part to the larger size display it has now. Beyond that, it has all the likable elements from before, a responsive rate, and a pretty good autocorrect feature. With the Sense 6.0 music player, we don't see any dramatic changes to the presentation or functionality, but it still continues to be one of the more dynamic looking music players out there, thanks to the visualizer option, which gives it some cool 3D effects. On top of that, it'll even display lyrics as the song's being played. Now, with its two front-firing speakers with HTC boom sound, it just provides for a very engaging audio experience. It's loud, powerful, and robust. Here's the updated camera UI. It's just nice that HTC has decided to separate the video and still image capture settings, just because with last year's unit, they actually combined everything into one menu-driven system, which made it a little bit confusing finding particular settings. Shutterbugs will be especially happy with the camera UI just because it lays claim to several different shooting modes and even manual controls, and it's pretty quick when it comes to snapping photos. Like we've detailed already in the beginning, the handset features two cameras in the rear. The main primary one is the same 4 megapixel snapper from before, while the top one here, the secondary one, is strictly used to provide depth information. So you're all probably dying to know, how does the ultra pixel camera fare this time around? Well, when we look at the general quality of its images, we gotta say we're a little bit disappointed just because there isn't a dramatic improvement with the overall quality. And when we look at it closely, it pretty much mimics the quality from before. Meaning it takes some pretty good looking outdoor shots as long as sunlight is available and plentiful, so you're going to get a good dynamic range. You're not going to see areas that are too underexposed, though details tend to be a little bit skimpy in comparison to some of the beefier megapixel count cameras out there. The camera specialty is taking macro or close-up shots just because you get that cool out of focus effect with the background and you get a good emphasis with your subject. It's nice that the process for snapping panoramics is a simple one, but when it comes to the quality, it's again lacking in the details department. Under lower lighting situations, it's nice that the photos are pretty bright and exposes a lot of the details, and it minimizes noise, but at the same time, it's still kind of soft toned and the colors tend to have a little bit of a washed out look to them. And yes, there's also an HDR mode as well. However, we're not particularly sold with the quality just because it seems to do nothing more than bump up the exposure to draw out some of the details that would otherwise be lost in the darker areas of the photo. But the result here is that it tends to make the images appear a little bit airy in tone. Without a doubt, the coolest part about the photo experience is utilizing the handful of different duo effects to really enhance the photos. Essentially, the premise here is allowing us the option to select what areas of the photo we want to be in focus. Now, it only works with images captured in the 16:9 aspect ratio. It won't work for macros or close-ups or photos in the 4:3 aspect ratio. So once you're taking the photo, you go to the edit, and from here we have a bunch of different duo effects at our disposal. We have U-Focus, Foregrounder, Seasons, Dimension Plus Sticker, Copy and Paste. I'm going to go through them very quickly here. The first two are particularly useful, U-Focus and Foregrounder. With U-Focus, we're able to select areas of the photo that we want to be in focus, while the other area will have that cool bokeh effect. So we just tap here, that's going to be in focus. If we want this one to be in focus, we tap there, and you can see how it gives that blur or bokeh effect to the area outside of it. And it's just really nice just because you get that professional touch. Likewise, we could say the same thing about the foregrounder effect. So when we select that, we have 4 options to choose from. We have sketch, and what happens here, as you could tell, we could select elements in the photo that we want to have the effect applied. So it's really neat. You have a zoom blur, which gives the emphasis towards the subject, a cartoon, which basically makes the background get that cartoon look, or we could just have a certain area of the image in color while everything else is in black and white with the colorize effect. However, people might find some of the other duo effects a little bit on the silly side. For example, you have seasons, which gives it an animated look. You could select from 4 different options: Sakura, Dandelion, Maple Leaf, and Snow. And you have also this 3D Dimension Plus quality to it, which basically you could tilt the phone and you could see how it kind of mimics a 3D look, but sometimes it looks a little bit distorted. Ultimately, the duo effects really breathe some life to an otherwise stale camera on the HTC One. The features are cool, and it's just nice that we get these professional-like quality right on the handset. But then again, it's not something necessarily new, just because on other handsets and even third-party applications, we can achieve the same process as well. But the more pressing matter here is just the overall quality of its ultra-pixel camera. It's still underwhelming and doesn't necessarily improve upon last year. 1080p's turn out okay as long as you have a good amount of lighting, just because under lower lighting situations we see details becoming a little bit softer in tone and the frame rate drops a little bit. But outdoors, where there's plenty of sun, you're gonna get some pleasant looking videos. We do notice that the continuous autofocus is just a little bit jumpy and sensitive. It's just constantly adjusting on the fly, and every now and then you might see it out of focus. Color quality is outstanding with the HTC One, thanks in part to its commanding speakers. The earpiece provides enough volume, even in noisy environments, to make out the clear voices coming out through it. And the same thing we could say about using the speakerphone. On the other end line, our callers had no issues whatsoever too. Even with wind coming in, it's able to cancel it out, so our callers are greeted with nothing but clear and distinctive voices. Battery life is pretty darn good here with its 2600 milliamp hour battery. In fact, with our battery benchmark test, it achieved a rating of 7 hours and 15 minutes from a full charge, which is pretty impressive to say the least, easily beating out some of the other handsets we've checked out in the past. When it comes to everyday operation, it's more than equipped to handle an easy, solid 1 day of heavy usage. Luckily for the HTC One, it's being made readily available right from the get-go, and you could pick it up for roughly $200 with a 2-year contract with several different carriers. It's really tough to say where the new HTC One fits into the greater scheme of things, but there are 2 things that really stand out with this handset. The first one being is its impressive industrial design. It's just unrivaled in this space. It's one of the few phones out there that continues to have a very premium quality with its construction, and also one of the few to sport a mostly metal body. Secondly, there's the duo camera in the phone. That's the second camera in the back here. It's not something we traditionally find in smartphones, but it does deliver some really cool effects after we snap our photos. But when we look at the overall quality of the ultra pixel camera, it still kind of pales in comparison to its rivals and doesn't really improve upon the quality from last year's camera. At the end of the day, the HTC One just doesn't have enough of the dramatic improvements to steer it ahead of the class. Ultimately, we could say that it has a stunning design, but as we know, good looks can only get you so far. So if you guys want to learn more about the new HTC One, you can check out our website, phonearena.com. It's John V. Thanks for watching.